I didn't realize how small my world had become until the night I sat in my car, staring at the dashboard, afraid to go inside my own home. Nothing dramatic had happened that day. No fight, no slammed doors. Just a quiet, heavy dread sitting in my chest, like a weight I'd gotten used to carrying. That was the first moment I admitted to myself something was wrong. I work as a cashier at a local grocery store. Nothing fancy, but I like the routine. My shifts end early enough that I usually get home before dinner. My boyfriend, Derek, works irregular hours at a small auto shop. When we first met, he felt easy to be around. He'd joke about customers, bring me leftover lunch, pick me up after late shifts. It all felt thoughtful at the time. But somewhere along the way, that warmth turned into something I didn't immediately recognize. It started quietly. If I was 5 minutes late leaving work, he'd text, "Where are you? Thought you were done." Not angry, just monitoring. If I mentioned a coworker, male or female, he'd ask a few too many questions. Why did they need you? Did you talk long? Each time, he said it with a smile, like he was just curious. I brushed it off. Everyone gets protective, right? That's what I told myself. The first real shift happened when he started commenting on my routines. He'd frown when I grabbed cheap frozen meals because I was tired. "You know, real adults cook," he'd say. If I wanted to read before bed, he'd sigh and switch off the light. "You never pay attention to me anymore." If I didn't immediately respond to something he said, he'd mutter, "You always zone out. It's like you're not even trying." It wasn't screaming. It wasn't name-calling. It was quieter, more subtle, like he was sanding away tiny pieces of me. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal. But then he started reorganizing things I'd placed around the apartment. I'd put my keys in a bowl near the door. He'd move them to a drawer so they don't look messy. My favorite mug disappeared for a week because he didn't like the chip on the handle. Even my clothes. He'd tell me a shirt looked immature or jeans made me look unprofessional, even though my job didn't require any kind of dress code. The final nudge came one day after work. I stopped by my sister's place to drop off some extra groceries. Just a quick visit. But when I got home 30 minutes later than usual, Derek was sitting at the kitchen table, arms crossed, staring at the wall. He didn't yell or accuse me of anything. He just said, "You could have texted. It's disrespectful when you don't consider me." That word, disrespectful, lingered in the air like something sour. It didn't fit what had happened, but he repeated it like it was fact, and I found myself apologizing even though I hadn't done anything wrong. That night, lying in bed, I realized I'd been apologizing a lot. For being tired, for not replying fast enough, for wanting space, for having a life outside him. The moment that truly stuck with me was a week later. I was getting ready for work, grabbing a light jacket I'd always worn. Derek looked at me and said, "Don't wear that. It makes you look sloppy. People judge how someone reflects on their partner, you know." Something in me paused. Not because of the jacket, but because of the word reflects, like I was an extension of him, something he needed to polish until I fit into whatever picture he wanted. On my lunch break that day, I sat behind the store, eating alone, and felt this sharp, quiet thought form in the back of my mind. If I keep shrinking myself like this, I won't have anything left. That evening, when I pulled into the driveway, I found myself gripping the steering wheel, staring at the porch light. My stomach tightened just thinking about walking inside. Not because of danger, just tension, constant and exhausting. That was when the truth finally surfaced. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a simple, undeniable fact. I didn't feel safe being me around him anymore. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The weeks that followed felt like walking on a floor that shifted under my feet. I kept waiting for things to get better if I just tried harder. Spoke softer, kept the apartment tidier, didn't stay late at work, didn't visit friends too long, didn't forget to text. Every day felt like a new rule I had to learn, even though the rules kept changing. Derek wasn't explosive. That almost made it worse. He'd say something quietly cutting, and then return to whatever he was doing, leaving me to sit with the sting. If I looked hurt, he'd act confused. You always take things the wrong way. If I pushed back, he'd fold his arms and tell me my tone was aggressive. Eventually, I just stopped pushing. One afternoon, I came home from a shift where I'd spent hours restocking canned goods because someone called in sick. I was exhausted, my back hurt, my feet hurt, and all I wanted was 10 minutes to myself. Instead, I walked into the living room and found Derek pacing. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" His voice wasn't raised, but the tension was sharp. I checked my pocket. One missed call. "I was working the aisle, didn't hear it." "You always have an excuse." He ran a hand through his hair. "You know how it feels when you ignore me?" Ignore. That word snapped something in me. A missed call because I was literally doing my job had turned into a personal offense. I apologized anyway because it was easier and watched his shoulders relax like he'd won something. Later that night, I overheard him on the phone. Speaker accidentally turned up as he walked past the bathroom while I brushed my teeth. He was talking to his brother. "She's just difficult sometimes. Sensitive. I'm trying to get her to be more responsible." Responsible. That one stung like a slap. The pattern sharpened after that. He'd tease me in front of his friends about forgetting things. He'd tell me my job was easy and I was lucky I didn't have real stress. If I disagreed with him on anything, movies, dinner plans, groceries, he'd tell me I was being dramatic. My preferences became inconveniences he tolerated. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. I'd promised my mom I'd help her sort through some boxes in her attic. She can't lift much anymore, and I try to help when I can. Derek knew about it all week. When I grabbed my keys, he looked up from the couch with this confused expression. "Where are you going?" "To my mom's. I told you." He shook his head slowly. "You didn't remind me." "I told you 3 times. "See?" he said, standing up. "This is what I mean. You never communicate clearly. You spring things on me and then blame me when I'm surprised." I stared at him, stunned. "It's helping my mom. It's not a surprise." He crossed his arms. "You always choose other people over me." Something inside me finally cracked open. A small, steady voice rose up. "This isn't love. This is control." But out loud, I said nothing. I just left. At my mom's, while handing her boxes and listening to her chat about old photo albums, I kept replaying the morning in my head. How everything always became my fault. How he twisted things until I questioned my own memory. How every tiny part of my life now hinged on whether he approved. By the time I drove back home, the sun was setting and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, just from realization. Derek wasn't going to stop. He didn't want a partner. He wanted someone he could shape, someone he could correct and fix, until I wasn't myself anymore. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. He was in the kitchen, arms folded, waiting. Before he could speak, something inside me settled. I was done. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely done. And if he wanted to keep treating me like a problem he needed to manage, then I was about to become a problem he couldn't control at all. Once the decision settled in my mind, everything he said started sounding different. Not heavier, clearer. I could hear the patterns, the digs, the rehearsed disappointment. And instead of shrinking, I started paying attention. Quietly, patiently, like someone studying a machine they were getting ready to turn off for good. I didn't confront him. That would have given him something to twist. Instead, I acted normal, maybe even a little softer than usual. He seemed relieved, which told me exactly how much he relied on me bending first. The first step of my plan wasn't dramatic. I just stopped sharing things he could later use against me. If I stayed late, I said nothing. If I visited my sister, I told her not to post any photos. If I bought groceries, I kept the receipt. If he questioned anything, I calmly said, "I don't remember exactly," and let the silence hang. Without details to manipulate, he got frustrated, but he had nothing to latch onto. The second step was even simpler. I started writing things down. Not in a diary, he'd find that. I used the Notes app on my phone, but disguised it as grocery lists. Each note looked like groceries, meat, or cleaning supplies. Inside, I wrote dates and short descriptions, the comments he made, the guilt trips, the way he reacted when I helped my family. I didn't embellish. I kept it plain, factual, boring. Something only meaningful if you knew what it was. The third step came naturally. I let him talk. Derek loved explaining why he was right, why he was reasonable, why everyone else was the problem. If I expressed the slightest disagreement, he'd launch into long speeches about how I should listen better or improve my attitude. So I let him talk, and I listened like a recorder, storing every contradiction. One afternoon, he told me I never communicated plans, even though I'd texted him twice about my schedule that day. He dismissed the texts as vague. 2 days later, he said I was smothering him with updates, when I'd sent only one message saying I'd be home around 6. I wrote both down. I didn't know exactly how I'd use any of this yet. I just knew I needed to see the full picture without his voice in my head rewriting it. Then the opportunity showed up on its own. It was a Thursday evening. I walked in from work and found Derek sitting at the table with a stack of envelopes. Bills, mostly. He held one out like he was offering me evidence. "You forgot to pay your part of the rent." My stomach tightened. I knew I hadn't. I always paid my half on the same day every month. I kept confirmation emails. I opened my mouth to say so, but something stopped me. This was the hole he was digging. Instead of defending myself, I asked, "Can I see it?" He slid the envelope across the table. It wasn't a late notice. It wasn't anything, really. Just an automatically generated reminder that the rent portal would open for next month. He hadn't even read it fully. I looked at him and asked, "Why did you think I forgot?" He frowned. "Because you always do stuff like this. You're unreliable. I feel like I'm carrying everything." That word, unreliable, was new, but the tactic wasn't. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just said quietly, "Okay." His shoulders loosened like he'd proven something. That night, after he fell asleep, I pulled out my phone and finished my plan. I started packing, but not in boxes. That would have set him off. I packed slowly, in pieces, over 3 days. A sweater tossed into my work bag. My childhood photo album left in my trunk, by accident. Important documents slipped inside old grocery sacks. A few changes of clothes buried under the spare tire well. By Saturday night, everything that mattered was already out of the apartment. All that was left was one final step, giving him enough rope to show exactly who he was. The next morning, over breakfast, he made a comment about how I never appreciated how patient he was. Normally, I'd freeze or apologize. Instead, I asked calmly, "Do you really think you've been patient with me?" He launched into a long critique, how I was forgetful, emotional, inconsistent, how he had to correct me so I'd learn. Every word was exactly the kind of thing he denied saying whenever I brought it up later. And I let him talk. When he finished, I nodded slowly. Not upset, not surprised. Just finished. He didn't realize it yet, but he just handed me everything I needed to walk away clean. I waited until Monday morning, when Derek always left early to open the auto shop. The door clicked shut. His car pulled away. And for the first time in months, the apartment felt quiet in a way that didn't suffocate. I already had everything important out, so all I needed to do was leave my key on the counter and lock the door behind me. But I didn't leave right away. I took a slow walk through the apartment, the one place that had managed to feel smaller every week. The little rearranged spaces, the drawers he'd claimed, the corner where my favorite mug had once lived before he hid it. It all looked different now. Not intimidating, just small, smaller than me. I placed the key next to the salt shaker, grabbed my bag, and walked out. What came next wasn't dramatic. I didn't send him a long text, or a speech, or a breakup letter. I simply wrote, "I'm moving out. I'll pick up anything I missed later. Please don't contact me." Then I blocked him everywhere. The fallout started within the hour. At first, I got a few calls from unknown numbers, ones I didn't answer. Then messages from his brother asking what was going on. Then a text from a friend of his saying Derek was confused and thought I'd overreacted. The usual chorus. But I stayed silent. By the end of the week, the tone shifted. A long message apparently sent from his coworker's phone said Derek deserved an explanation, and that leaving like that was cruel. Another claimed he just wanted closure, but every message only confirmed one thing. He wasn't seeking understanding. He was seeking control. My sister helped me move the last forgotten items from the apartment. Derek wasn't there. He'd already packed my remaining things into plastic bags and left them on the porch, like he was the one letting go of me. I smiled a little at that. Let him have the narrative. I had the truth. 2 weeks later, I got an email from the landlord. Derek had tried to claim I'd left without warning and stuck him with the full rent. The landlord asked for clarification. I sent screenshots, not dramatic ones, just the plain, boring notes I'd kept. The texts where I told Derek my schedule. The receipts showing my half of the rent paid every month. The message I sent him the morning I left. The landlord replied within the hour. Thank you for the documentation. You're not responsible for any additional charges. That was the moment I felt the weight slide off completely. Not because I won, but because everything he'd worked so hard to distort finally sat in the open, plain, and unbendable. The real revenge wasn't the exit. It was the clarity. I kept living my life, work, family, small routines that felt mine again. And slowly, I started taking up space I hadn't realized I'd lost. I cooked when I wanted. I stayed late at my sister's without checking the clock. I wore my old jacket, the sloppy one, every time it rained. Months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Derek had a new girlfriend, and that things weren't going well. He complained she was too independent, hard to manage, not reliable. The same script. But this time, she had a bigger support system, louder boundaries, and no hesitation calling out his behavior. Apparently, she'd moved out after 3 months. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel pity either. Just confirmation. Some people don't change because they don't want to. They only change partners. As for me, I learned something I didn't expect. Revenge doesn't always look like a grand gesture. Sometimes it's as simple as leaving quietly, taking back your life piece by piece, and letting someone finally face themselves without you standing in the way. And standing in my new apartment, surrounded by things exactly where I wanted them, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Room to breathe. Room to be myself again. Room that belonged entirely to me.